Deakin University would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the unceded lands, skies and waterways on which our students and staff come together. As we learn, teach, innovate and research through virtually and physically constructed places across time, we pay our deep respect to the elders and ancestors who have cared for the country that you join us from, an ancient place where education, innovation and knowledge transfer have taken place for many thousands of years. At Deakin, we aim to nurture and continue this important legacy whilst encouraging our communities to walk softly on country in the spirit of sustainability. In particular, we give gratitude to the elders and ancestors of Wadawurrung country, Wurundjeri country, and Eastern Maar country and beyond, where our physical campuses are located. Their contributions to our learning communities and environments are rich and highly valued. Deakin is committed to embedding Indigenous knowledges and perspectives in all disciplines that we teach, as well as advancing the self-determined interests of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, including treaty and truth-telling. As you move around our physical and virtual environments, take a moment to consider, appreciate, and listen deeply to the country beneath your feet.
We do acknowledge that we're here on the land of unceded, or the Wurundjeri people, the Kulin Nation, here at Deakin downtown, and as you heard across our campuses, we always begin with acknowledgement of country. That's really important, but tonight we are particularly privileged. We're going to hear from Mark and Travis about their country and about issues related to that and things that Joanne's been studying. But first I'm going to ask Professor Feti Mansouri, who is the director of the Upper Deakin Institute, to say some opening comments and to frame this public policy discussion. We do have 40-50 people online, so thank you for joining us online, and we are recording this, so for those who don't get a chance to follow us in real time, we'll have this as a resource for a really interesting conversation to fall back on.
Thank you, Greg. I won't say a lot, and I won't use up a lot of the time, but our esteemed panelists would obviously need to reflect on these issues, but I do add my voice to yours and acknowledge that we are indeed meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, lands that have not been ceded, that have been, are, and will always be lands of the First Nations people. And of course, given the topic of tonight, it's absolutely important that when we utter these sentences, we reflect on the history of dispossession, the history of what I call cultural oppression in many ways, that have been really brought about on such a rich history and civilization on this land that we call Australia. But really delighted to have such a wonderful, esteemed panel tonight, and the timing could not have been better. I mean, in 3 weeks' time, we will have Australians going to the polls. It's a referendum, it's a yes or no vote, but it's nonetheless extremely important, I think, and it's a watershed moment in the history of this young nation. That young nation in terms of settler colonialism, but ancient nation in terms of the history and the cultures of the Indigenous peoples. So we add our voice to the voice of those people who are genuinely engaged and committed to the process of recognition, but also reconciliation. So handing back to you, Greg, and look forward to the discussion. Joanna, Mark, of course, and Travis.
Thank you, Feti. Let me, there's so much to say here, but it's not my place to say. We're going to have a really interesting conversation, so we don't take up more time than we need in introductions. Let me just quickly read out a few comments about, well, Mark. I could spend half an hour talking about his background. I'm not going to, but Professor Mark Rose is our Pro-Vice Chancellor Indigenous Strategy and Innovation at Deakin. He's traditionally linked with the Gunditjmara Nation of Western Victoria. We were speaking of Western District earlier on. Interesting stories there. But Mark's had a 44-year career in education. I mean, he's been everywhere. We were talking a minute ago about he was principal in Casterton Catholic High School years ago, but a lot of things in between. And he's contributed in a broad range of settings. He's also sat on 5 ministerial advisory committees. He's co-chaired the Victorian implementation review of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Deaths in Custody, and he's chaired the Batchelor Council. There's a whole lot more I could add, but I won't. Professor Joanna Cruikshank is Associate Professor in History at Deakin. Once again, a lot of things to mention, but just a few pertinent points. She's a Chief Investigator on an ARC Discovery Indigenous, which examines the leadership of Aboriginal people in conducting lawful relations with the settler government in Victoria. So going back into history, because it's, I mean, we need to acknowledge a lot of bad things that happened, but also a lot of people stood up and did some important things. Before that, from 2011 to 2016, Joanna was part of a team on another ARC linkage grant that was called Minutes of Evidence, which looked at the ways in which colonial and post-colonial societies have responded to injustice. So it's very good to have that professional historian perspective as well. And Travis, once again, I could go into a lot of things that Travis has done and is doing. He's certainly doing a lot of things at the moment because he's a commissioner on Victoria's truth-telling process, the Europe Justice Commission. And it's a really important time, not just because of the referendum, but because the Commission's just had a report and it's in the process of hearings. And anyway, Travis will tell us about that. Travis is a Gunditjmara traditional owner. He's held senior leadership roles in the Victorian Public Service, including Executive Director and Acting Deputy Secretary of the First Peoples State Relations in the Department of Premier and Cabinet. We can ask you about Premier and Cabinet afterwards if we run out of time. A lot of things happening. He played a key role in supporting Victoria to progress and implement the treaty and truth-telling. And that's one of the things we're going to be focusing on in the conversation with Travis tonight. He's also played a key role in the expansion reform of the magistrate and children's Koori courts across Victoria. It's a really practical thing in terms of how young lives are changed. So that's enough in terms of introductory comments. I think Joanna, Mark, Travis will say some introductory comments of their own about stuff they're working on, things that they want to discuss tonight. But this is not a, it's not a lecture, it's a conversation. And it's a very informal conversation. And halfway through, we're going to turn, or if not earlier, to you in the room and also you online and take your comments and questions so that you're part of the conversation as well. So thank you guys. I've asked you to come and sit at the front just because we've got recording and cameras on you.
It's a bit come forward, eh? It's a bit transactional. Come forward.
Yeah.
Maurice, a bit have something wrong with these seats, are they? They've got a broken leg. Come forward.
Yeah, if you don't come forward.
Yeah, forward already. Yeah. Much closer.
Well, Mark, I might start with you because you're our senior guy. Pro-Vice Chancellor. And you got more white hair than the rest of us.
I colour it this way to give myself to look more. You look more like Colonel Sanders.
Been mentioning it, so it's more.
He does love the uncle status.
Yeah, senior uncle, right? Yeah, super uncle. Yeah, Mark, would you want to talk about what you? Well, this is a really important time, as Betty was just saying, just 3 weeks away from this referendum. Lots of things happening, and some things are encouraging, some things are discouraging. But you've been busy working this process to try and help people understand.
Sure. I just like to acknowledge country too, and this land is Wurundjeri land, but for a long time it was disputed land. And if you go to the quadrant, you can look across the bay and see Boonwurrung country. So this would have been a place where Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung would have come to share knowledge with respect. And like Sarah Palin, who said she could see Russia from her front yard, I can see Boonwurrung. Don't let that get back to the elders. I'll be in a lot of trouble. But I bring the compliments of my elders and the respect of my ancestors. It's great to be on a panel with a young countryman who's doing dramatic work. And it's good to be on a panel with you too, with your work. Can I just say it is 2 weeks to go, and if I'm sounding, my voice is sounding very alluring and husky, I want to recognise the mob in the room and all the fellow travellers who we've got on a lot of journeys. So welcome to everyone here and online. I've just written something about the voice, and I've spoken every day at some function. Yesterday, I was able to talk about equity rather than the voice, and my voice is going. It's a crazy thing that I'm becoming addicted to butter menthols. But having said that, it's a referendum, and and the referendum is a kind of bind. It's been hijacked politically, and both by the red ties and the blue ties. And it's also been hijacked by parochial Aboriginal thoughts. And you mentioned how I co-chaired the Royal Commission with Auntie Joy. I just wrote about it this afternoon, and it brought me to tears about a young kid in juvenile justice who the night before tried to hang himself with his T-shirt, and it was a Midnight Oil T-shirt. I remember hugging him very closely and feeling the breath in his body. And you know, we can talk and intellectualize the voice, but what about his voice? How are we going to hear that and translate that into the process? When we handed down that Royal Commission, we dedicated to the men, women and kids who find the surrealism of the criminal justice system more attractive than the realism of their own life. And so the work at Deakin and of Glowway and incorporating Indigenous perspectives into the leaders, the thought leaders, the professionals of the future is another part of the voice. But it really is a plebiscite on the heart and soul of this country. It's not just the binary yes and no. That's easy. It will win or not win. If you're going to take bets, the odds are pretty long at the moment. But I actually believe in the spirit of the Australian people that when they're pushed to the back, and this is our chance to be Australia, to stand up and say to the politicians, go away, this is our business. To the polling houses and the media moguls, this is our business. And when you pull the curtain, if they still have curtains when you vote, it comes down to we the people. And that's what I'm appealing to, we the people. So, yeah, I might shut up. I give 3-hour lectures without drawing breath. So, so Greg, please moderate.
It's a Gunditjmara trait. We talk underwater.
We do.
Thank you, Mark. I'll go in order since the rest were sitting here. Joanna?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm really very honoured to be here, and I pay my respects to the elders, the ancestors here in Wurundjeri country, and acknowledge that their sovereignty was never ceded. And I'm really honoured to be sitting here with Mark and Travis. We don't know each other, but I'm really grateful to be having this conversation with you. And I'm, you know, I'm a white person. My ancestors came in, they were Scottish people who made a really bad decision to become colonisers and came in to Wathaurong country and then kind of about the 1860s and became part of the sort of colonising forces all the way up to Queensland, which is where I come from. So, you know, my perspective on this is shaped by the kind of material benefit and the privilege that I've received as a result of that, but also the sort of relational loss and poverty and you know, harm that has come out of that ancestry. So, you know, the work that I do as a historian is not simply an intellectual work. It's not just something that I do kind of objectively. It's, you know, shaped by that for better and for worse. So I've spent about the past 15 years working on topics in the kind of history of colonisation. Before that, I had about 5 years as a British historian, and I saw the light. But I can tell you about 18th century hymns if anybody wants to know about that, but that's not what we're talking about. I can sing them too, but we're not talking about that. But I've really had the enormous privilege of doing a lot of that work under the leadership of, or in partnership with Aboriginal people, and so I have a lot of thoughts about what history has to say to us at this moment. Unfortunately, one of the things I think history has to say, the history of this nation has to say, is that non-Indigenous Australians often don't want to learn from history and don't want to listen to history. And that's a bit of a tricky, that's a challenge. If we say there's things to learn from history, but there's a resistance to learning from history, that's a problem. Maybe we can talk about that, particularly the kind of work that you're doing, really important work of truth telling. You know, what's happening in terms of listening and tell truth. So that might take us off track though. I suppose and by listening I mean not just learning with your mind, but actually listening like we care, like we're going to act, like we're going to change, like it really matters, which is a different kind of listening that I think we non-Indigenous people are not very good at, white people are not very good at. I think the other point I just wanted to make, when I was preparing for this evening, I went back and just read through some of the voices of Aboriginal leaders and activists that I've come across, and some of those people are really famous and some of them are not. And one of the things that struck me just when I was reading back through that was that the idea that is kind of being discussed quite a lot in the context of the voice, that the party political system doesn't work well as a mechanism for often doesn't work well as a mechanism for making significant change for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And that's something that we've heard of quite a bit about in the context of the voice. But when I was going back reading, it's such a common thing, you know, 100 years ago, not quite 100 years ago, Bill Onus was running for Parliament here in Victoria as a member of the Aborigines Advancement League, and saying, this is your Gunditjmara people, and saying, you know, we've trusted white people to represent us and they haven't done it, we need to represent ourselves. 20 years later, I was looking at Bill Ferguson, 1949, was running another like trade unionist, you know, solid, in lots of ways solid Labor man, but he was running as an independent. He was saying, you know, Chifley could have, the Labor government could have repealed the protection legislation. They could have done something about that. They haven't done it. We've got to represent ourselves. So I think that, you know, that's just one small thing. There's these long traditions. These are not new ideas that just, you know, started being, they're the fruit of the long fight that Aboriginal people have had. They're not just kind of, new ideas. They're old, they're the fruit of a long struggle and long knowledge. So they're important.
And there's a lot of work to be done, and there's work that is being done. Travis, you're in the middle of doing some really important work here.
Yeah, you do justice. But I guess as accustomed to everyone else on the panel, and as you have done, I do my acknowledgements in language, which is a little bit different. And it's not to throw shade at any of our elders or ancestors. It's more to send them messages to let them know that their fight and their resistance and their advocacy is still thriving on country as well. So latinho. Travis lava kira ma Gunditjmara meeting. Linia ko kon kenan kon la tere Gunditjmara yung bin meeting. What under ma meeting go meeting. Di engkala banjung wengwa ma book bidon meeting. Nada kitong meeting, nada kitong ma min burn. So I just pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. And pay my respects to their creative spirit, which is Bunjil, but also Wa, which is the Crow. Many people don't know that there's laws and customs that we as Aboriginal people have to follow, whether we're on our country or other people's country. So I always think it's important that we recognise the creators, but also the laws as well, because you know we're here to tread lightly on country while we're here, and hopefully we can make some positive tracks. in the work and advocacy that we're doing. Also, as well, spiritual connection to waterways is incredibly important. We always talk about land rights, as we as blackfellas also talk about. And naturally encompass that. Thank you. Naturally encompass water as a part of that, not only for ceremony but also the opportunity that it comes around rejuvenation and replenishment of country, but also the advocacy of our people around the lack of economic development that we get from water. Water falls out of the sky. It's worth trillions of dollars to, I guess, the Australian economy, and we very rarely see an ounce of that money at all. So I always think it's important to acknowledge our connections and ongoing connections to water as well. And also, as a proud Gunditjmara man, acknowledge my connections to Lake Conda, and also Budjabin, which is one of our mountains as well. So I think that's I don't know if many people have done any research around the UNESCO announcement where we got World Heritage listing for Budjabin. So if you don't know about it, please do a quick Google of that, because that's one of the first and only I guess World Heritage sites that's I guess accepted based on purely just Indigenous values as well. So that's really important to me personally, and also cousin here as well. Yeah, we're doing heaps of work, so much going on, you know, and without repeating kind of what other panelists have said. I do speak very fast, so apologies about that. It's just because us Gunditjmara people do, you know, speak underwater, and I always say we're chasing kuyang, which is our word for eels, because we're traditional eel farmers, us Gunditjmara people. So we're always, you know, swimming around. Yeah, so, and also a bit of black humour. Blackfellas love a good joke. So I think we'll try to weave as many of those in as possible as well. But yeah, really pertinent time at the moment, particularly for our people. You know, we are really, personally myself, really focusing on the voices through truth telling. You know, we are the first state in the nation to have a truth telling commission. We are leading the way on I guess, you know, voice, treaty, and truth. And I think that that's something that I do give a shout out to the government for actually making the commitment to invest in these types of processes, because they're incredibly important as well. We have prioritised, I guess, as part of the recent work around investigating the ongoing systemic injustice, which includes racism in the child protection and criminal justice system. We've had ministers as well as the Attorney General come before us and over numerous, I guess, hearings. We've also had, as I said, senior bureaucrats, but community. And they're the main voices. It's actually the community are the ones that we want to hear from, and that we have been hearing from and actually prioritising, because it's their lived experience, their continual lived experience. It's a lot of people think history is yesterday, history is today. They haven't changed. We have had numerous, as I said, ministers and senior bureaucrats come and apologise for the ongoing systemic failures, and that's underpinned by racism as well. And we can't shy away from that. But we've put together a really solid roadmap around the 46 recommendations that we've provided to go back to government, and we'll continue to advocate for them to be implemented in full. But one of the unique things about this truth-telling process as well is that we do have a First Peoples Assembly of Victoria, and they're the ones that actually are negotiating treaties. So a lot of our community will come before us and will say, well, we've had a Royal Commission to Aboriginal Deaths in custody. What's happening there? What's happening with the implementation? So of those recommendations, and not to take away from our people's fight and advocacy all across the country, not just in Victoria, but we haven't had any, I guess, we haven't been listened to. The voices haven't been listened to. The advocacy's been there, for sure. But I guess the point of difference I'm trying to point out here in Victoria is we now have a First Peoples Assembly to also help advocate for the implementation of those recommendations. We have recommended quite a transformational recommendation, which is a brand new child protection system. And I know that for some people that's quite mind-blowing. But again, at the end of the day, you know, the facts and the evidence, it's not Aboriginal commissioners who sit on the commission's gut feel about what we want. It's actually underpinned by facts and evidence and people's testimonies, and also responses back from bureaucrats and senior ministers who have come and apologised for the systems and not being able to answer questions. Government has committed to self-determination. But then when I asked them personally, can you explain to me what self-determination is? Many of them couldn't answer that question, but you've got a commitment to it. They've said that they've transferred power and resources. I said, well, how much power and resources have you transferred back to our people? Because we've been advocating for it, and you have a government framework, because government need a framework to be able to implement things. But yet very little to actually no power and resources have been transferred over. But handing back a broken colonial system is what they determine as self-determination. So that's just not me saying that, that's actually them saying it. So I think that there's broad commitment. We have seen some commitment from, I guess, the government to not only implement the processes of treaty and truth-telling, but we still will continue to advocate for our recommendations, which we feel really strongly about, to be implemented. And as I said, we do have the point of difference with this Royal Commission, that we have a First Peoples representative body that we as Aboriginal people got to elect, which is a really important point. And that's what our people have fought for. Our people have fought for equality. We don't have self-determination. And we want what non-Aboriginal people have. And that's pretty much the equality that our people have fought for. I'll sort of leave it there for now.
Well, thanks, guys. We're going to come back to that shortly, I'm sure, because that's we can talk about the voice in terms of this referendum and what might happen in the future. But this is a lived, immediate experience showing, not just why we should, but what we get to benefit from, how this can be transformative, what the practical difference it can make.
Yeah. So we're going to say this, I'm sure. Sorry, take it over here. Great. I think it's a really important point, because one of the things I was reflecting on from when we did our media day to launch the report, and there was a lot of questions from reporters, particularly about new systems only for Aboriginal people. What we have to realise is that we as Aboriginal people, when we advocate for changes to bail, to raise the age, it's not just for our community, it's for the whole community. And I think that's something that is really lost in translation. It's all about, we want things differently. And that's absolutely not the case, is that we advocate for changes to those systems to ensure that our people have the same opportunities as other people as well. So whether that be in a negative context or in a positive context, when we're, of course all our kids want a decent form of education, for instance. So our people are just fighting for our rights to make sure that our voices are heard. But naturally, it's implied that non-Aboriginal people, education outcomes are just as important as our kids as well.
Yeah, that's a really important point, Travis. I think, unfortunately, there's many unfortunate things about the current level of discussion, debate, if you like, but one is that it's kind of a zero-sum game. Somebody wins, somebody loses. But that's, you're talking about the fact that we all win when we do things right. And they're looking after one group, that particularly where there's injustices that need to be dealt with and practical problems, it's not just about one mob, it's about everyone benefiting. Get to have a more healthy society.
Thanks. And because we live and work in the cracks of all machine, the point that Travis said, that the benefits flow out to everyone. Look at the recent skills audit and the passport, the electronic passport that's been discussed at VAI, Victorian Aboriginal Education, for the last 10 years. 3-year-old kinder started at VAI table. So when a leader there gets an honorary doctorate next week, I'm allowed to announce it, but I have that anyway. And the work that he has led has benefited every kid, not just Aboriginal kids. So when you listen to us, we have a lot greater outcome. And I remember, you remember Auntie Mary, she ripped me once because I said I thought something was a coincidence. And she said, people who believe in coincidences are those who lost faith in ancestral intercession. And And where you mentioned Bill Owners, he's our uncle, and his revenge on the discrimination he felt was that he gave this great city the name Moomba. And for those of you in the audience who are laughing, you know that people think Moomba means get together and have fun. Your moom means your backside, it really means up yours. So there are, yeah, I don't know why I said that. I'm going to take a look at Break Friday. Tell some more bad. Let me workshop that a bit more.
Well, you did just tell me that you did a comedy night recently, so you could probably keep
I
going.
think the house is a very small room.
Yeah, I mean, to me there's so many obvious benefits to all people in this place for Aboriginal voices to be more, clearly heard, to have more influence, to have more say. And I really think it is a sign of how bankrupt our imagination is that we can only imagine people seeking a voice for selfish and corrupt reasons. It really, I mean, you said it's a plebiscite on our soul, and I do think that the debate is revealing not hidden things, because they've always been pretty obvious, but to me there is such a tragedy about that. And it's not that I think that non-Indigenous people should be voting for the voice for their own benefit, but I think it is for our benefit, and it's a tragedy to me that we can't imagine anything else collectively.
Also as well, probably just coming back to celebrating the successes of Aboriginal people's contributions to Victoria. We generally, as very humble Aboriginal people, we don't really talk about ourselves because it's a shame job and all that kind of stuff. But our people have done a lot for this state, and we can rattle off a lot of names here. But I just wanted to really, highlight the fact that we turn up to work just like everybody else. We get stuck in traffic just like everybody else. But also, talking about voices, and not to bring a somber tone to this, but we've had 34 since 1991, Royal Commission of Aboriginal Deaths in Custody. We've had 34 people pass away in Victorian prisons since 1991. 34. Where's their voices? As you were saying before, what about their voices? People focusing on why they were in custody in the first place. It's not the actual question. There's a duty of care to these people. I'd asked the Minister for Police and also the Chief Commissioner of Police if anyone had been accountable for any of those 34 deaths in custody. What do you think the answer was? None. Was there ever any WorkSafe investigation? Because sometimes things happen on work sites and places that WorkSafe come in. WorkSafe ever called to come in and do an investigation? None. Any internal kind of human resources processes put in place, conversations? Zero. Zero. So again, we come back to voices, the importance of voices and the importance of the injustices our people have faced. Which is really, it's incredibly heartbreaking. And I'm not trying to bring more trauma to the families who have been through it. I have personally lost a family member, actually two, out of those 34 as well. So, it's incredibly important to us. And we do feel, a deep weight of responsibility to make sure that we elevate those voices, particularly the voices that aren't being heard. But this is another key part of what we're trying to do with truth telling. We're also encouraging non-Aboriginal people to come forward, and you shared some of your families' contributions to colonisation, to say it politely. But we're encouraging non-Aboriginal people to also come forward and talk about their family stories and the things that they know about what their family's been involved in as well, because I think that's incredibly important for the public record. This is our people's chance for the first time to tell our truths, not the Aboriginal truths. This is the true history of Victoria, and that's something that is incredibly important and powerful for our people to be able to have this process, to be able to engage in this, but also for government to take, take stock, but also reflect and respond to our recommendations. I'll keep coming back to that because I feel really strongly about what that means for our people as well.
And Trav, you would know that there was a Royal Commission review in the state that Auntie Joy and I co-chair, and those deaths in custody, if you want to read a real horror piece of work, I had the job of reading all the coroner's reports, and you're right, they were voices that weren't heard. But there's always been reviews. We've gone through ATSIC, we've gone through Congress, and there's a lot of us who, when this came around, the voice is just another hoax. We have been contributed to reports and they've gone nowhere. Royal Commission 339 recommendations, then the Royal Commission review in the state, we added another 68, I think, to it. And no, again, there were still deaths in custody. There's still kids that will be excluded from school. There's still a need for us to keep watch. And the binary arguments, see, my voice is going because of the voice, but the binary arguments that are just absolute bullshit. No, sorry, that wasn't very academic, but there's no other way I can describe it. In the parliamentary sense of the word, so yeah. But, the arguments that, name me one person who has died from advice. And, the thing about we'll create a Canberra elite, we won't listen to remote people, we'll make the situation worse. No, it's only about advice, and no one's ever suffered because of advice. There's no power in it. And if there's anything, we're not asking for enough. And I guess that's where the split between our community and the fractions are real. And there's a mob in the room here tonight. The fractions are really real between the Aboriginal no, the progressive no's, and just the no's for no other good reason. But it's been a grueling process. And if I don't hand the mic to Joe, my voice will disappear. Yeah, I'm going to get them out. I carry them.
I don't have a particular point to
I got what I'm addicted to it.
I'll just come back to the 34 deaths in custody, and that's since 1991. But what about the many hundreds and hundreds before that? That's just since 1991. Again, no accountability. So again, we have contributed a lot to society, and we'll continue to do that. That's what we do. I stopped using the word resilience through the work that I've done. I've kind of learned that yes, our people are resilient, but I think that the word resilience is, when it comes to our people, is misinterpreted, particularly for non-Aboriginal people, that we'll just get over it because you can do it again to us. So I've changed my frame and actually used the word resistance, because we've been resistant the whole time. We're strong people. We've been very resistant the whole time and advocated for our people's rights, for self-determination. But again, equality, because a lot of non-Aboriginal people got self-determination, but our people don't have self-determination on our own country. So, really important point to make there.
Thanks, Travis. And resistance, I mean, I understand what you're saying about, we talk about resilience. It's a bit like talking about tolerance. It seems like a cop-out. We just sort of take a passive position. You're talking about changing things, though. I mean, you are radical in a sense. You do want to make some changes so that we don't keep making the mistakes again and again. Can you unpack for us a little bit about what's happening with your, I mean, it's Justice Commission, but it's not just about hearing the voices and getting justice. It's about trying to put in place systemic changes so that the systemic problems don't keep on causing harm.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. That's exactly the key work of the commission. We are, I guess, a truth-telling commission, but we do have Royal Commission powers. We've decided to not actively promote the fact that we do have Royal Commission powers because, again, our people are sceptical. Our people are sceptical of government processes, even though we are independent. But when you hear Royal Commission, you think back to other Royal Commissions that have been mentioned. Deaths in custody, what's been happened to those 339 recommendations, and then the subsequent 69 that Cousin Mark was talking about as well. So what's happened to these things? But one of the things that we were able to, I guess, execute through the Royal Commission powers when we tried to get information out of government at this particular point, and they were being very slow with document production. So we decided to call a hearing to hold them to account. And that was really interesting process, but also powerful for our people to understand that we can, we're serious. This is not just an Aboriginal Royal Commission that we can kind of sweep to the side. We are a Royal Commission and we'll choose to execute those powers as we need to. And I think that that's something that we heard pretty loud and clear from community when we did hold those government accountability hearings. It was like, wow, like, hang on a sec. We've seen the way that users are able to question, but also keep them accountable to the one point where I couldn't help myself because we all acknowledge country here, and we did have someone from the state side turn up to this particular hearing day, and I gave them an opportunity to acknowledge country. And the sad fact is that they had to take an adjournment for 10 minutes to work out the wording to how to do an acknowledgement of country. It's all on the record. We've got it up on our stream, so it just goes to show that's a long way to go, you know, and there was a lot of embarrassment from that individual, but it goes to show that I think one of the other commissioners said, would you treat another Royal Commission like this? And the response from the government side was no. That's, you know, we push past these types of things and focus on the broader, I guess, systematic failures. And I think that's something that we were able to grill multiple, I guess, ministers and public servants about in the criminal justice system, the child protection system. You know, our people are 13 times overrepresented in the criminal justice system, our men and women. I think our children are 11 Aboriginal children to one non-Aboriginal child in child protection, in the child protection system. So 11 out of what? So every 11 child, there's one non-Aboriginal child that are in child protection. I've got a couple of copies of the report here that I'm happy to share with people as well. It's all on our website as well. So, but our role is to really hear the voices and then make recommendations for changing the systems and structures. As well, you know, one of the other damning factors is that it's mandatory. So that means 100% when it's mandatory, yeah? Mandatory to have Aboriginal cultural plans for children in child protection. Only 67 of them have, this is data from the department, not our made up data from the department, but 67% of them are completed. But we couldn't clarify to what level that they were completed. But 67, but they're mandatory. Now, if our people are engaged in that system and they didn't do their mandatory tests and processes that they need to be able to jump through the hurdles to be able to get their children back, they wouldn't get their children back as well. So, but we are here to provide, I guess, recommendations, and we've done that, and they're really powerful. We've made really solid recommendations for the government to be able to take up, particularly in treaty as well. Really exciting, some really transformational things, and I'm probably sure that maybe the government was a little bit shocked at some of those recommendations as well. But again, if we want to see change, like our people want to see change, there needs to be investment, but there needs to be a transfer of power and resources under true self-determination. Power and resources, transferring them to our people to be able to develop and design the systems that work for our people, and you will see better outcomes because you're listening to the voices of our people. And we are accountable to our people. We want to be even more accountable. That's why we're saying, give us the power and resources to design the systems. Then you can look at us when they go wrong. rather than you look at us now, but you hand over a broken colonial system, and you're still trying to keep us accountable for that. So, yeah.
So, Travis, that person who didn't do the acknowledgement of country, how was Sam Newman? Sorry, cheap shot. Can I just sit here and sort of envision what life would be with a voice? And in some ways, the work we're doing here at Deakin, I think is pretty sensational. The moment I arrived back at this, I've been here 3 times. I was here as a student in the 70s with long hair, and Deakin was only 2 years old then. I was a bit older than 2 years old. And then I was here as chair of Indigenous Strategy, worked with Brenda there, and we did some great work. And back here as Pro-Vice Chancellor, and one of the first things I was hit with, the legacy of Alfred Deakin. It kind of, you've probably seen a bit of the media lately. And what we did is we handled it in a very cultural way. We put in the room the relatives of Alfred Deakin, along with some significant Aboriginal people, an expert group, including Tom Kelmer, Human Rights Commissioner, Geraldine Atkinson from Treaty, Rod Little from Congress, Joy Murphy, whose uncle used to deal with Alfred Deakin personally, and they had a conversation, and it was a respectful conversation. And the blackfellas were amazed that the Alfred Deakin family was so honest and so forthright in their truth-telling. In fact, many of us said, we hope our family aren't as hard on us when we pass, and I think mine might be actually, but it's another story. And so we came up with a proposition that, and I went to the Indigenous Advisory Council, and as a second step, to say we did not have an appetite to change the name for 1,000 Aboriginal people have come through here and have gone back and liberated themselves, their families and their communities through education, and that we are branded, and I'm one of them, to Deakin University, not Alfred Deakin, the legacy. And so we thought it would be virtual signaling to consider changing the name. The cost and the time that it will take us all focus to renegotiate another name. So I think we've handled it very well, and but it's predicated on truth telling, which is now inserted into curriculum areas through the Glow 8 process. A number of the room have come and done the Glow 8, and you know, there is one side of my job I think is a bit strange, is I spend a bit of time counselling non-Indigenous academics who are facing kids who have just come through kindergarten, early childhood with Aboriginal perspective, compulsory primary with Aboriginal perspectives, compulsory secondary with Aboriginal perspectives, and they're saying, where is it at tertiary level? And, you know, I asked the same question. So we are putting it out there with predicated on truth telling the full history of this country. And Deakin, with the spirit of 85, Auntie Mary setting up KTEP, then Ike, the transition to Naikiri, and the way that we've got as many of our students in general programs as we have in Naikiri now, means that it's a sign of success. And I sat at a table in Cairns with a Torres Strait Islander family who I caught up with, and who told me that Mum and Dad were missionaries and they came to Ike back in the 80s, and now in their family there are 23 degrees of all the kids and the grandkids. So the revolution has started here. Deakin has been an early adopter and an early leader in it, and I'm pretty proud of that, and I'm glad I'm back here to work with that. And but the whole rise here is predicated on voice. Ian has got an Indigenous Advisory Council that gives him free and frank advice, and he's such a great leader. He laps it up and he really values it. And an instance of that is, remember when the Queen died, and there was an issue about lowering the Aboriginal flags, and it got a bit controversial at different universities, and it got kind of raised here that should we lower, look at Glenn in the front row. This is PTSD, mate, is it? Am I doing therapy? But an example of that was, there was a move by some students and staff to lower the, to raise the Aboriginal flag while the other flags were at half mast. And I said, no, we went back, we pulled the Indigenous Advisory Council, and they said no. Whatever significant elder passed, what would you do then? Would you lower all the flags? And 2 days later, Uncle Jack Charles passed. I could hear him talking to me saying, see, young fella, got you out of shit again. So the voice is alive and active here in the compacts that we're setting up in faculties are predicated on the voice. Our colleague Hero and Chewy over there in the library really amplify and turn up the power of the voice. I reckon this is a good place to be. Yeah. So, and in the future, what will a voice Australia look like? A reconciled Australia. I've been invited to the audience of Q&A on Monday. So I'm at the Daikiri graduation, then racing to South Bank to the ABC, the audience. And in the audience is the Northern Territory Senator, she's there. Dan Tehan, who lives on our country, the Liberal member, and Peter, who was starred in the Alibrandi movie. And we had the ABC senators, would you like to submit a question that they'll consider? I submitted this question. I thought to the panelists, is the metaphor of Alibrandi a bit like where a young girl tries to find her identity through culture? Is that the same thing that's happening in The Voice at the moment? And is The Voice really a search like Alibrandi for its heart and soul? So, yeah, watch on Monday to see whether it gets up. If not, forget about it. So watch a pretty replay.
You didn't even need to go through his phone to name drop all those people, did you?
There's nothing like a black dollar name dropping.
It's very great.
I just wanted to pick up on something you said, Travis, about that history of resistance and just kind of, the way in which these kind of deficit narratives of Aboriginal history have really dominated, and yet the stories of talking about here and Wurundjeri country, Gunditjmara country, Kulin Nations countries, the histories of resistance from day one of invasion. And I had the privilege of working on this project about Coranderrk, which is now a very well-known story, but it really wasn't before that outside Aboriginal communities, and the kind of story of, Wurundjeri and other nations building for themselves, from the ground up, this community. But, in some ways, I had people say to me when I was working on that project, that was kind of unusual. And it of course, there were things about Coranderrk that were unusual, but I think it's more that so many of the histories of resistance, of survival, of creative ways of surviving in the midst of this oppressive, unjust, violent society just aren't known. And to me, that's part of the history that also informs whether it's self-determination, really, is this amazing history of whether it's Aboriginal community controlled organisations, which, in the 70s and 80s were really built from the absolute ground up with so little government support, in the face often of resistance. Aboriginal people, building their own organisations to meet their own needs. You know, there's such a strong history of that is not known, but I think is a really important part of, again, this is not it's not a new idea. It's not, we're talking about people who have generations of surviving, of resisting, of coming up with creative ways of living in a kind of apocalyptic post-invasion environment. And I think that's a really important history that isn't known. Just there's a few examples that have a wider knowledge, but yeah.
So much to unpack there, thank you. I did promise that we would throw to the floor for the chance for some questions and a broader conversation, and I know that there are folk online. Kira stepped out, so when she comes back I'll ask who's online and who's got questions there. But I wanted to give you a chance to ask questions in the room, and I know that Vanessa's done work in this space, so I'm hoping to hear from her on some of the work she's done, because some interesting perspectives across continents on truth-telling. So if there's no other hands going up, I'm going to, there's a hand at the back, and I'll come to Vanessa later on. We've got a spare microphone. I'll take this one here and grab one there. Thanks very much.
I was wondering if you could comment on the international context for Australia. Obviously, we signed up to UNDRIP. That means something. That means we have to put money where our mouth is. And also what that means for Australia as far as perception goes. We're the only country in the world that doesn't have a treaty with their First Nations communities. And so I'm wondering, I mean, I know that that's not about the voice, it's about the perception from the outside and why we're so far behind.
It's certainly part of the package of what needs to be dealt with, isn't it?
It's a really, thanks for a really good question. And we are behind. But what Joe was talking about, the resistance movement, there are documents such as the Coolangatta Statement on Indigenous Education. To me, it's a manifest of self-determination. UNDRIP, I was at, dropping names again, I was at the UN.
Where was that, Mark?
The UN. With the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, which is a really interesting process. The language of the UN is really strange, and you get there in the morning and you try and negotiate a place to get your 8 minutes to talk, and it's cutthroat, because we compete with Oceania. But the UNDRIP is a great document, and it took so long. We rely on the bakery. My only answer is we rely on the bakeries of Westminster, and we've got this perpetual wrecking ball. Sounds like a song, but I won't go there. But it comes in like a wrecking ball. Parties don't get voted in, parties get voted out. And the one that comes in wants to look completely different to the one that just got voted out. It means that our business, and why the gap isn't closed, gets taken back to ground zero. And of course, recognising UNDRIP was very much a part of that. But the underground community movement, particularly here in Victoria, where we were contributors to the Coolangatta Statement and other big manifestos, I think is really important. And the self-determinant voice, Travis, is going back to resistance. There's a saying in the Victorian community, if you ever get in a fight, and we often do, you've got to have at least one lovebird on your side. So I've got one in the room, I've got back up here today. But when our aunties were thrown off the back of trucks in Fitzroy, because they were deemed as half-castes or quadroons, and they were taken away from the real blackfellas on the country and chucked off the back of trucks. They gravitated around Laminex tables and caused a revolution that became those statewide law. The Corandurk one was a bit earlier, of course, when the population shrunk, and it was like a multinational Indigenous gathering at Corandurk. But the old Fitzroy is just as rich. Lydia's grandma, Alma, who's a beautiful woman, I love her to death, one of our mob, she talks about with half out that Old Fitzroy was a community, and that 3 groups of people in Old Fitzroy, the Crims, the Blackfella, and the Commies. And she said we all got together and we created places that become Batchelor and Vai and Batchelor and all the statewide organisations. So, yeah, we've always had a voice. And the internet, I'm not parking the international thing. We're held ransom to the vagaries of Westminster. And that's why a permanent voice is very important, so that we can't legislatively be thrown out at the whim of the next neoliberal that takes up residency in the lodge. So, yeah. I don't answer your question because I love the document. I was in the initial conversations over there, and my favourite bar is the Havana Club on 46th Street. So, but I work very hard when I go to the UN. Oh, hang on, this is being recorded. I'm in big trouble. My name is Warren Mundine, all right?
You don't look like Warren Mundine. You don't sound like Warren Mundine, Mark.
Well, I actually played up Greg at the NAIDOC March. We start the march at the health service, and 3KND, the Aboriginal radio station, was silly enough to come and interview me, and they said, could you tell the audience who you are? I said, yeah, I'm Warren Mundine. I've changed my mind. I'm going yes. The panel operators were rolling around the floor. So, yeah, you got to have fun. That's part of resilience and resistance. You go laugh at the situation.
Well, that's not a trivial matter, right? If you're not laughing, then how are you dealing with lots of heavy stuff? I mean, humour is part of resistance, is it not?
That's right. Yeah, spot on. I think I said at the start about having bring a bit of black humour. But talking about UNDRIP as well, without going into too much detail, further work that we'll do in UDOOC may or may not be looking at UNDRIP principles and the lack of implementation of those. Also, as well as we have, as Aboriginal people, we have human rights like everybody else in this room, but there's a point of difference which falls under it, which is cultural rights. And we haven't been able to generate the cultural rights to the level of expectations that our people have continually fought for. But we definitely, it's on our minds around particularly not only it being international best practice, but also the keyword accountable and enforceable. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, Vanessa, I'm going to come to you in a minute.
Fine.
No, I want to hear it. I want you to, well, I'm looking to you to contribute to the conversation because of the work you've been doing, but I'll pass the mic directly to you rather than second guess what you're going to say.
Okay. I've been put on the spot here. We've been doing this project around documenting community truth-telling for the last 2 years. And I mean, I think it speaks to very much what people have been talking about, the incredible diversity and creativity of the responses to the colonial legacy. I mean, I don't think I expected the kind of rich community activity that we found all over the country. I mean, our initial mapping process identified about 400 different initiatives across the country. And this is all completely self-generated, often with very few resources. Some of these projects processes have been going for decades. And I think over time, all this grassroots activity has collectively shifted the national narrative about Australia's colonial history and its impact. And I think it is shifting kind of consciousness of non-Indigenous people at a local level. I think sometimes, particularly in the current context, it's easy to get demoralized about the current, national discourse, its toxicity, its racism. But I think it's important to keep in mind the incredibly powerful, positive work that is actually happening at a grassroots level. And I think also what's happening in Victoria speaks to that. The fact that there's a first person, the assembly, there's a truth process, Sky hasn't fallen in, and those processes will continue whatever happens with the national referendum. So, I mean, what I was going to ask the panel to maybe reflect on is whatever, I don't want to put you on the spot to ask you what you think is going to be the outcome on the 15th of October, but I was wondering about your thoughts about how we build from here, because I think this is, even if the voice gets up, I think it's just the start of the process. There's an enormous amount of work that needs to continue to happen. And I think there's probably going to be a lot of rebuilding that's going to need to be done in the wake of this incredibly difficult and contested process that's happened. So I was just interested in some of your thoughts about how we build and rebuild after, going forward after 15th of October.
Before I take the mic back, Vanessa, just thank you. That's a really good set of questions. And I'll just one second. I just wanted to get one more thing out of you. You've got a privilege of looking at this process as an academic, but also looking at the South African experience. What does that sort of show to you about what we need to be doing in Australia? What lessons are there to be learned?
Well, actually, I mean, I was involved in the South African truth process, which ages me, but it's, and I've come to this country quite recently to talk from my personal experience. I came in 2016, and I was very interested in the conversation that was emerging around truth-telling in the wake of the Uluru Statement. And what worried me was, in some senses, the way in which people talked about the South African experience in quite uncritical terms. And having been part of that process, despite it, it was an incredibly powerful, valuable, remarkable process in many, many ways, but at the same time was very flawed. And I think it's very important. And since then, there have been many different truth processes all around the world. And I think in some senses, that's been quite problematic, because there's been a bit of a sort of formulaic approach to truth-telling in different contexts, and a kind of potentially an imposition of a particular model of transitional justice. So I think what is really important, basically, is to have processes that are grown from the ground up and informed by local contexts. It's one can learn from international experiences, but I think it's really important that people own their own history, own kind of experience, and own wisdom. And I think that is happening in Australia. So I ended up actually learning a lot, as a result of being here, from what's happening in this country.
Thank you, Vanessa. That's very helpful. Sorry, Mark, I cut you off.
No, not at all. Thanks for those comments. And I love the comment that the sky hasn't fallen in, and I don't believe it will. And I think we will move to a more mature place. We're a very immature nation, and with telling the full history, and there are different truths. We know that if you come to one of our glowaways, I talk about an elder who grew up in was born in Central Desert. He was stolen and taken to Darwin as a stolen kid. It was just around the time when the Japanese bombed Darwin, and then he got sent back to his family. And he says, quite unashamedly, "Thank Christ for the Japanese." In standard conventional Australian discourse, the Japanese was an imperial expansionist force that shamelessly attacked Australia before Brian Butler, a little kid, stolen. He was caught between two forces. And does that make Brian right or the other convention? No. It takes us to a deeper place that the truth lies somewhere between, and the ability to deal with competing worldviews and still ground ourselves is the real reward for this and the maturity of this country. So I'm excited about where we're going. Paul O'Brien's going to hate me for telling that story better. He unashamedly said, now I've been attacked by a former Tim Smith. He had a go. Telling that story was understated. No, and wants him to stop with us anymore. But are we in the voice? Are we ready to hear when we? It's one thing if we get the voice and we'll wake up. And I don't know where it's going to go. If I was a betting person, although the odds are very long, I reckon it might be a poor investment at the moment. But I read the book by Peter Seligman, Learned Optimism, and in it he says optimists sound good, but they actually die sooner and have more accidents than pessimists. So he says you've got to get to learn optimism, so somewhere between the two. So without not having to avoid a car accident and pass away earlier, that I'm still very optimistic. I reckon we can read the polls, we can listen to the media moguls, but at the end of the day, everything that happens on this country happens at the intercession of the elders, the ancestors, I mean, yeah.
I'm part of the Centre for Contemporary Histories, which is within ADI, and we recently completed some surveys on Australian attitudes to history. And one of the kind of startling, I mean, there's a pretty gold standard polling. It wasn't the Herald Sun kind of ring 10 people sort of results. This was good quality results. And one of the most striking results to me was that two of the statements that Australians most strongly agreed on were that they wanted more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history taught in schools, incredibly high levels of support for that, like over 80% in every age group. And they strongly agreed with this statement. Almost 90% of people agreed with the statement. History should celebrate the nation's past. Now, to me, those two values are in tension, and the question is which of those there's a deep fracture in Australian public identity, I think, at the moment, and I think the question is which one of those is going to triumph. I'm fairly cynical, not cynical, but I don't have a lot of faith in us as a nation, but I'm gonna listen to the voice of an elder and listen to what Mark is saying, and I think we should listen to that. But to me, there is a profound tension and conflict there, and part of that is what we're seeing play out in this situation, and it's not going to go away regardless of the result.
Yeah, I think, was it 93 for Mabo decision, 93, 94, 93. There was a lot of angst around the Mabo decision. People worried. What happened? Not much happened. Not much happened at all, really. So yes, there's been hundreds more native title determinations, but there was a lot of scare campaigning going on, and very well, not at all. Nothing really came to, I guess, fruition about people having to be worried. So again, picking up on a couple of points here, I'm really worried personally about the social emotional well-being of our people, because we're in the spotlight whether we like it or not. And I just want to recognise that key part as well. We got, we're 3% of the population, so 97% of the population is deciding what's best for us, which is definitely not, I guess, an equal conversation. But also as well, I think it's a time for, no matter what the outcome really, around investing in people educating themselves around all these particular things that are happening in our society. You know, I mean, not to give Google a shout out, but I mean, people, you know, when they worried about their sickness or whatever, what do? They jump on Google. Oh, what are my symptoms? Rah. So they make the time and effort to do small things. Young ones with TikTok and all these other apps and so forth, they're spending a lot of time, but then if they just spend a little bit of time on doing some research and understanding, you know, not only, I guess, the true history, the trauma, but also the positives that our people have done and contributed to, I think, you know, would be, I guess, where we need to get to as a people, as a nation as well, around just that continual growth around mindset, around listening and learning and reflecting. I think is incredibly important as well, but definitely optimistic. We have to be as Aboriginal people. We have worked with you know, every government since practically day one, and I think we'll continue to do that into the future because that's all we know as well. So yeah.
Perhaps it'd be helpful to talk a little bit, Travis, about the plan of work ahead with Europe, because whatever happens October 15, that doesn't change Europe. You've got a lot of things you want to be doing and working on. What's next?
Yeah, great. So we've spoken about our inquiry into child protection and criminal justice, and we will be looking at other streams like health, education, housing, socio-economic and political life. So looking at all the, I guess, those particular key areas of inquiry that we'll need to do, I think is incredibly important to our people, to our culture, but also elevating the voices and our contributions, but telling a really strong, in an articulated way, very clearly that we also had system structures, infrastructure, we had governance, or we have not had, we continue to have, but pre-colonisation, we had everything we needed. Everything that we needed as a people, as a society, and it operated incredibly functional as well. There is a misconception that, again, and our people, as Gunditjmara people, have proved many people wrong, that, you know, 7,800 years worth of agriculture system, the oldest agriculture system in the world, but we didn't know how to farm, and we didn't have a farm country, but yet we had 7,800 years, older than the pyramids, for instance. And
we have running water though.
Hey?
Do we have running water?
So yeah, again, so you know, but again, how and to have that kind of infrastructure, you clearly need to have decision making where elders come together, you know, and so forth as well. So again, really for us, it's about documenting the true history of Victoria, but also celebrating our people's success and contributions to life before colonisation and the impacts. In particular, those original instructions that were never followed. And a lot of people don't know about those original instructions that were sent out, but they were never followed. And we'll have more to say as Europe goes on. But again, picking up also on the South African model, one of the I guess positives, but also could be seen as a negative, that our people have been fighting for truth and treaty for so long, is that we have the ability to look across the world to see what has worked for people, but also what hasn't worked for other First Nations people, to be able to identify the wins, but also listen to their learnings around some of the things that they thought that they were negotiating under treaty, for instance, didn't come to the full fruition as to what they thought it would be. So having the ability to be able to deeply reflect, but also deep listening. I think that there was a listening comment earlier as well, and that's something that we practice as Aboriginal people. We don't hear, we listen, and that's we can hear what's going on next door, but we're not listening, right? So having the ability to really listen to, and that's part of our culture, listening to people, elders, but also meeting, which is country, listening to the country, let country talk. And that's how we respond. We always listen before we respond.
Thank you. And speaking of listening, are there any questions or just comments, observations from the floor or on the group online? Yes, I'll pass you the mic.
I think it's really interesting too with the whole debate about the voice. I've been involved with the grassroots Indigenous community in the Northwest Kimberley for 30 years. And for 30 years, I've talked to my family about my experiences. And I remember one year, it was in the year of Anyway, my father was randomly chosen out of a telephone book to go to Canberra to talk about reconciliation. And I said to him, great. I said, maybe you'd like to talk to this elder who, you know, I had known at that stage for probably 10 years. And he said, well, what would he know? And I said, Dad, he's Aboriginal. And you're going to Canberra to talk about this. Now, just the other day, my father, he has a Polish friend, and basically she started to sort of talk about the Aboriginals who were doing an introduction at the MCG. And she said, why are they dressed like this? And she said, you know, what are they really trying to say? And you know what, my father, he said, they come from here, this is their culture, and that's what they're saying. Right. And I thought, great. This is the first time in 30 years that my father finally got it. But what he loved about this voice thing is all the media coverage has taught him a lot. And he actually once said to me, he said, Aboriginal people need a publicist. Because I said to him, how can you make that comment? Do you know an Aboriginal person? And he said, that's when he said they need a good publicist. But I think that is a really positive outcome of this yes and no, because for once, there is so much media coverage about it that Mr. and Mrs. Joe Blogs, who know nothing, are actually learning something. And Marcia Langton once said, you know, oh, they learned it off the radio. You know, what's that? She wrote a very famous paper called, but it was all about the fact that people are much prepared to listen to the media, like my father, than even me, who's actually working on the ground. And I took an exhibition of their work to the UN as well. So there you go. I'm going to name drop.
We go to the same pub.
We go to the same bar.
Yeah. So you are doing some advocacy in public, which is good. That's really important. Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
I mean,
What part of the Kimberley were you?
In the Northwest. So they're the Wandjina people.
Oh, right, yeah. Falls Creek is a
No, that's east.
east, okay.
West.
Okay. We didn't have compasses, so.
But that's all right.
That's my experience.
That's all right. But you know, I hope.
Although my way around 46th Street, so.
Tell it on his ankle.
Yeah.
But there's lots of voices in that story.
No,
of
I
being
actually-
invisible and not being listened to, and you know. Yeah.
If I had a reflection now, I think we've got to a point on the 14th of October where we might be able to start having a campaign about the sad part. It's going to be over, but people are rushing it, and they are talking about it, and people are having conversations.
Yeah.
And it's lifted us to a point of engagement, which is good. Trouble is that we probably need a bit longer. It's
But maybe it started something, because as I said,
yeah.
my father, for once in that 30 years, there was an acknowledgement of even the work I have done. Whereas before,
Yeah.
I have really struggled to even educate my own family.
Yeah.
And I mean that, you know, it's been hard.
I went to a regional reconciliation dinner in Geelong, and the guy, a non-Indigenous guy, did the acknowledgement of the country, and he did it so well. He took out his phone and put it on the big screen, and it was his daughter who was walking through a park and wanted to sing that song of Welcome to Country. And I thought, well, how far have we come? You know, you can't walk up Burke Street without seeing every person with an Aboriginal land art on. You go to Coles, so they've got a rap and a statement. Qantas does acknowledge with the country where they land. They also do one where they send your luggage by mistake too. That's another story. But
Yeah, we've come a long, long way.
we have come a long way, and it's an exciting time. And when we get to the 14th of October, I reckon we're just at the start of the flight. And you know, again, I'm going to be optimistic.
It's being broadcast now, and so just
the genie's out of the bottle, and
the genie's out of the bottle. And like this woman who comes from Poland, you know, she has no awareness of Australian Indigenous culture, and this is the problem. We have got a lot of people who come from other countries who, if we're not even telling our own children these histories, how are these people who've just landed here, knowing that Australia is the land of opportunity? Who are these people over here who wanting this?
I'm probably off script a bit, but you know, if you read the statement from the heart, it does carry heart. It carries emotion. If you read the American Constitution, it starts off with "We the people." It goes to the pursuit of happiness, and it talks about everyone being equal under God's eyes. I don't think Trump actually read it, but it's there. Our constitution is like a business plan. You know, West Australia can be part of the federation, provided we give them a railroad, and they've got the ability to succeed. New Zealand can be part of Australia, and all these transactional things. There's no heart and soul in it. It's a very pale, stale, grey document, and the statement of the heart gives our founding document a bit of heart and soul. Maybe because it was done at it was actually an act of the British Parliament, and which became the Australian Constitution. It wasn't even ours to start off with. So, you know, we've all. I mean, my idea of reconciliation is we say stuff has happened. I usually swear, but I've sworn enough tonight that stuff has happened. So let us, as adults, black and white, process it as adults and move on and make sure it never happens again. Because without a voice and without reconciliation, it could happen to any group here. And there are other groups in this country. And Jacinda said, you know, her non-Indigenous side was dispossessed. Okay, I'm not going to buy into that argument, which means I probably have. But, you know, we've all had, it's been a tough start to this country and on this new version of the country, but it's time for us to mature, to say it's happened and let's move on from here. But we can't do it, and we can't find our own identity if we aren't brave enough to give a voice to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So it's a simple proposition. It's no harm, it's no power, no one's died with advice. The arguments that, you know, I'm just waiting for them to bring up, you know, they've trotted out, you know, all the classic arguments. If there was water flowing in the top, they'd say there'd be kids overboard. They would do that too. They'd come up with all the mythologies and, you know, rubbish. But as I said at my openings, this is a plebiscite of the heart and soul of the nation, and it's work that we all have to do.
Yeah, it's win-win. It's not about people losing. It's but it's just beginning, as you're saying. We're almost at the point of wrapping up, but I notice, Kira, there's a question coming from the.
Yes. So it's just an online question from Maggie, who says, I believe our secondary education curriculum has whitewashed the content of early Australian history presented to students, with most of the brutality of early colonisation completely missing. How do we change this? My kids know more about black slavery in US history than Australian history.
The question for a historian.
Well, I chaired the ACARA Indigenous Advisory Group and saw curriculum 9.0. Oh, sorry, didn't know which one to choose. Go through, and it is there. But people have to understand how curriculum works. It starts at ACARA, it cascades down to the states and territories who do their version, then cascades out to school systems. And by the time it reaches the kids' table, it's gone. But the ACARA deep history stuff is really good at cutting edge curriculum. So if it gets whitewashed, it's other parts of the filter that maybe your voice will listen to. But I know it inside and out.
I think as well, from Yuduk's point of view, I talked a little bit earlier about one of the other areas of inquiry, which will be the education system, and that's it's 3-year-old kinder all the way through to higher education. So we're looking forward to I guess inquiring and interrogating into things like curriculum and other things around that, and we'll have some recommendations that will go to the heart of was it Maggie? Sorry, I forgot the name. Maggie. Yeah, Maggie's question around providing potential recommendations. I can't preempt the recommendations. We've got to extract the evidence and have a look at what's currently, I guess, in the model that they currently implement. So, but I think naturally we would be providing advice back to government on what we would expect to see. Particularly building on the work that we've done and will do at Yuduk about historical and also the historical traumas, but also the historical and continued contributions of our people in society as well. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question.
Sure. Well, just be quick, Sarah, but thanks. Yep.
Thanks for that. Since we're talking about education and going back to the Polish lady who knew nothing about Indigenous people, I can reflect on that. Being a migrant myself in Australia around in 2014, I knew nothing about Indigenous people, and I had to educate myself on Google and YouTube just to know some of the history of this nation, which was horrific. So since we're talking about education, will there be any initiative targeting migrant community who arrived to Australia on different, visas and different visa schemes, right? For them to know and understand what's happening and what the history of the nation, and therefore, because they will be the momentum for any decision making in the future, like the referendum now.
Yeah, that's a really great question and many great points in there. And I think that's, I guess, part of being a Royal Commission. We can investigate and inquire into all those types of things and provide recommendations back to government on what the, I guess, what the future of that looks like as well. I think, so I'm trying not to be too committal because I don't want to preempt our recommendations. It's really hard to find line. I'll get in a lot of trouble. Just because, again, we need to also talk to our community to get them to, I guess, endorse, but also tell us what needs to change in the systems as well. So, non-Aboriginal people's voices are incredibly important as well. And one of the things that's come to, I guess, life in more of the conversations we're having, whether it's about the voice or whether it's about truth telling and treaty as well, is particularly migrant communities who have been impacted by colonisation. Having really deep conversations around with them about the impacts on them, and then coming into Australia and actually still seeing the same things that happen to them as well. So I'm really encouraged to hear also that you've done your own research, because a lot of people don't. So that's something that we really want to encourage from continually from now, but also moving forward, is to people to educate themselves. Aboriginal people, we loving and caring people. We care about all people. We've accepted a lot of people that have come here and done some really horrible things to us, but we still work with people to be able to get the job done. Whether it be, migrant communities, but also non-Aboriginal communities, Anglo communities as well. We work with everyone because we want to see a better future for all our people, which includes all Victorians, for instance, not just Aboriginal.
Thanks, Travis. I noticed a story the other day about Ahmed Singh, who founded the charity Turbans for Australia, who work on bushfires and flood relief. He's on a road trip now, going around talking with the community, which is really encouraging. Mark, we were here having a conversation a few months ago with the ABI IFTA, Deakin IFTA, and you said you might end up in New Zealand if the voice didn't get up.
I threatened that it's going to be very disappointing if it doesn't get up. It's going to take we're fighting Gunditjmara, Trev, aren't we? And I'm not going to go over there because, but I felt so inclined to say that I'll pack up and go to New Zealand. It was probably an extreme comment, but you can imagine Noel Pearson, who's a good mate of mine, and he's on Q&A next week too. He said it'll be the end of his public life. It's going to be sad. Look, we've been disappointed so many times. I was there at ASIC and Congress and every other thing that's come and gone. That's why the idea of a voice, a permanent channel, excites me. So I probably mellowed a bit, Greg, which is not like me, but I was on fire that night, wasn't I?
You were, and I knew as you said those words that your work is. I mean, I can't say it's just beginning because you've been going for 4.5 decades on this, but you're not giving up on October 15.
No, I'll be back.
I'll be back fighting.
Cost of living's too high, I need it. But yeah, no,
It's cold too.
oh, exactly. And but I'm trying to think of something funny, but I got nothing. I'm sorry. But yeah, it was a marked disappointment. It doesn't get up. But if it doesn't get up, it means the ancestors have deemed it. It might be the ancestors that started the conversation. But until I hear that it hasn't got up, I'm still talking up that it's going to get up. And again, the Australian people rushing up the hill at Gallipoli and fighting bushfires and doing a whole lot of brave things. When we come down to that, we look after each other, and this is a way which we can really, nail down who we are as a people, and whether we believe in some mythology that we are such brave and dynamic character. I think we are, and I think we'll get up. So yeah, I have to renew my passport. I was at the passport office today, and I probably won't renew it until after the 14th, or so I can't go there. That was a good question without no script. Thank you for that.
Thank you for all the work you're doing, Mark. I know you're not going to give up, and thank you, Joanna, for the work you're doing, because it's important to. We've got a lot more work to be done, including by professional historians in learning from the past. We've just begun to sort of learn some of those stories.
It shows what ideas factory this place is, and all the great work that you guys are doing. So yeah.
And thank you, Travis. Your work you're just midstream with, you've got a lot of stuff ahead of you. And so thank you for that. And thank you for being here tonight.
As I am, brother. All right.
Yeah, he was talking about 44 years. I'm only 40 myself. He's definitely educated for 40 years.
Yeah. Well, and thank you all for coming tonight and for folk online.
Thank you, everyone.